Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a concept the source material calls divine dependence. It's all about this really powerful shift away from self-reliance and towards a state of, well, spiritual surrender. So let's just start with a question I think a lot of us can relate to. Do you ever feel like the harder you try to get your life together, fix your habits, get everything in order, the more complicated and messy it all becomes? It's this super frustrating loop, and our source material says there's a very specific reason for it. The source points us to this ancient parable from the book of Matthew that just perfectly illustrates the problem. We're going to call it the self-reliance trap. And honestly, it's a huge warning. Okay, so this slide breaks down that trap into a four-step spiral. First, we empty the house. We get rid of the bad habits. But, and this is the key, if we just leave that space empty, the original negative thing comes back. And get this, it finds the place all clean and tidy, so it goes and gets 7 of its friends who are even worse, and the person's final state is way worse than when they started. The point is, just getting rid of the bad stuff isn't enough. You have to fill that void with something divine. So, if self-reliance is the trap, what was the original plan? Well, to figure that out, the source suggests we have to rewind all the way back to the story of Eden for what it calls the blueprint for a life of perfect dependence. And this slide just lays out the contrast so clearly. On the left, you've got the worldly method, just striving, toiling, trying to control everything with our own 2 hands. But on the right, you see what the source calls Adam's divine advantage, operating with a wisdom beyond our own, receiving what's needed without all the struggle, and living in this constant spiritual connection. It's a totally different way of living. This contrast actually leads us to a really big misunderstanding that a lot of people have, and the source compares it to another famous story, the prodigal son. The central idea here is that we are often just like that son who demanded his inheritance, not realizing he already had access to it all along. We're out there begging for things like peace or wisdom or strength, forgetting that, from this perspective, those things have already been given to us. And this isn't just an idea. The source material points right to Scripture to back it up. This passage says, divine power has given us everything. Notice the tense there. It's not will give, it's past tense. It's a done deal. And it doesn't stop there. This passage from Ephesians really doubles down on it, confirming we have already been blessed with every spiritual blessing. Again, the whole emphasis is on what's already been provided. And this one just brilliantly illustrates the logic behind it all. The argument being made is, look, if the biggest, most costly gift imaginable has already been given, then why would all the other smaller things be held back? It totally reframes our whole outlook from one of scarcity to one of incredible abundance. So if that's all true, it completely flips the purpose of prayer on its head. According to this view, it stops being a transaction, trying to convince God to give you something. Instead, prayer becomes an act of alignment. It's about tuning in, building a relationship, and learning how to receive what's already there for you. Okay, so how does this whole divine dependence thing actually work when life gets hard? Let's look at a framework for how you'd face a really big challenge. The source material lays out this 4-step journey. It starts when you're up against something that feels totally insurmountable. But the key, the real turning point, is step 2. You have to acknowledge your need. You become poor in spirit. It's in that moment of surrender, of finally admitting, I can't do this alone, that grace descends. And it's that divine help, not your own sweat and tears, that brings the victory. And all these ideas, they all come together in one final crucial point, figuring out and then relying on your one true source for everything. The source suggests that most of us, often without even thinking about it, build this kind of pyramid of trust. We put our faith in a whole lot of different things before we look up. Right at the very bottom, the foundation of this pyramid, it's us. Our own strength, our own smarts, our own hard work. One level up from that, we often put our closest relationships. Our friends, our family. And above them, we might look to bigger systems for security, right? Like our government or our job. And even near the top, in a faith context, it's pretty common to lean really heavily on spiritual leaders to guide us. But the source argues that the true pinnacle, the only totally reliable source, is Jesus alone. Everything else, your family, your job, your leaders, they're just channels that provision can flow through. They are never the source itself, and that is a huge distinction to make. When you start living from that place, depending only on the true source, that's what unlocks what the text calls your divine calling. This is that mandate to be fruitful, to multiply your impact, to replenish what's been lost, and to subdue or take godly authority over the circumstances in your life. And that leaves us with one final, big thought to consider. What becomes possible in your life, in your work, in your spirit, when you stop trying to draw water from finite wells and you finally plug into a source that is truly, absolutely unlimited?